I'm going to start with a story. Once upon a time, there was a horse who lived near Mullingar. She was a beautiful bay mare, but she broke out of her field one day and wandered far away, and got tangled in barbed wire. The wire twisted around her back leg, and by the time she was found, the leg had almost severed. She had pulled away fiercely, but the wire just continued to tighten around the bone. People said she would have to be put down, but the owner, who loved her greatly, wouldn't hear of that. Instead, the bay mare, with skin as silky as a chestnut, was nursed back to health. Her dressings changed twice or 3 times a day over a period of 6 months until she recovered, and then she was put in foal. Horses endure 11 months of pregnancy, I'm told, and because the bay mare's dates were mixed up, people were on their toes 6 weeks too soon. But then one day I heard through the grapevine that the mare was about to produce milk. The hour was almost at hand. I was asleep when I got a phone call around midnight on Wednesday to attend in a stable yard just outside the town. I'm not a vet. I'm as useless in a stable yard as a chocolate teapot, but I couldn't resist. When I arrived, the newborn had just been released from the amniotic sac and lay as slippery as an eel on the stable straw. People moved about beneath the half-moon and the clear sky, whispering, watching, and using their phones to take photos. The mare was still sweating in the straw, her eyes half closed. She had huge long eyelashes. She rose to her feet. The foal lay in the straw, and everyone waited to see if he would get up. "You're used to this sort of thing," I said to the man in charge. "This is the second tonight," he said, "and 2 more due. Last week we had 10. Most mares foal around the same time of year, and most of them foal at night. It's in their nature," he said, "so that the foal can rise and be on its feet before dawn, when in ancient times the herd might be ready to move off." People in the yard were still on edge, anxious that the afterbirth would be evacuated efficiently and completely. When it did arrive, it was taken to the end of the yard in a bucket and thoroughly scrutinized. Anything that might remain inside the mare could poison her. Suddenly a fuss stirred concerning the stable straw. Barrows of it were wheeled down the yard so as to make the cement floor soft and warm for where the young foal, not yet an hour in the world, was lying still. For 30 minutes the foal made attempts to stand. He was like a hopping frog. Finally he succeeded, stood with long, spindly limbs splayed out like a daddy-long-legs. People tried to get him to suckle, but he wasn't able to find the milk, and so he sucked a lot at the skin under the belly until someone helped him to the teat. The hind quarters of the bay mare were wiped with a cloth in a bucket of warm water. By then it was late in the night, and I decided to go home. Others remained until dawn. Some who went to bed could not sleep. Some remained all night in the stable just gazing at the shivering life, the foal dozing in the shelter of its mother's great haunches, and her palpitating heart. Thursday morning was cold. The people decided not to allow the foal outside. When he finally took his first steps at the yard on Friday towards the fields, some of the other horses made a great show of neighing and banging the stable doors with their hooves. As the weekend came, he got injections and was put out to grass. The big bay mare grazed with him and never took her eyes off him all day. The bay mare will never jump again, but her little foal will probably find his way in and out of many horse boxes and lorries and even aeroplanes, through many sales and various stable yards, into the pockets of countless arenas, and over many jumps, in Cavan and Belfast, in Hickstead and the RDS, as he jumps the jumps of a well-bred beast from the plains of Westmeath on his 4 perfectly formed little legs. Well, as you can guess, that's a reflection from Mullingar when I lived there, and I'm 10 years home from Mullingar, and I wrote that, I remember, in 2008, which is a long time ago now. It's 12 years ago. So that little foal, I can tell you, is doing well. But I can't put a name on him, and I don't know his track record recently. I read it because I loved the story. It was a rare privilege for me to be close to something like the birth of a horse. I was never on a horse, really, in my whole life. You know, I think I was on an old country horse in Gowna one time when I was 5 years of age. And I think that I remember when we'd go to Bundoran, I used to always like the donkeys, which I thought were horses. They certainly looked like horses to me at the time. And when you were a child with your parents in Bundoran, they'd bring you down and the man would put you up in the saddle of the donkey, and he'd take the reins and he'd bring you up and down the beach and charge your mammy and daddy maybe 6pence. And that was like being on a horse. And there was always a photograph taken of it, and I used to love looking at the photograph afterwards. And it'd be a big issue which horse I got, and I always loved to get a piebald horse. How could you have a piebald donkey, though? Like, there weren't obvious donkeys. So maybe there was some class of fancy little horse, little pony. I don't know the details. Again, I don't know much about horses. But I remember them horses in Bundoran. I used to really love them on the beach. And then there was one time, of course, because my daughter got into horses and she loves her horses and she's a grown woman now. And there was one time she encouraged me to get up on a horse in Timpawn in Leitrim where we live, and she just laughed. She doubled herself laughing because I got up on the horse without any problem. He was at the gate. But the minute he started moving, I panicked. I was saying, God almighty, this thing is moving. Well, of course it was moving. It was a horse, you know. And it wasn't even moving much, but the sensation of the legs moving underneath me was something I was completely new to, shocked by, terrified of. But I do love horses, and the one most beautiful story that you can ever tell about a horse is the birth of a horse, I think. I told you a story one time about the horse that belonged to the young girl. It was based on the true story that, you know, my daughter had a horse and had to let it go at a certain point. Sold it on, if you don't mind, to Sweden. I told that story in one of these podcasts. But today I wanted to tell you one about birth, because I wanted to think about birth. Now, this is the Laughing Buddha. This is the podcast to complete our little sequence of reflections on the Laughing Buddha. And for me, I said that I would deal with death today, and today is the 1st of November. Yesterday was Halloween, and today is the 1st of November. It's All Saints' Day. The light continues now to weaken every day, and the clocks changed on Saturday night. And here in Ireland, it gets bright still about 7:30 in the morning in the new winter time, and then by evening time, and I'm speaking now, it's 5 o'clock, and well, you can still see, but the light is fading in the sky. The greyness of the clouds is kind of permeating everything, and in another 60 minutes, it'll be dark. I think that's remarkable and beautiful at this time of year. And it's a time where you start to think about the dead, and you start to think about the world to come, or the world that is beyond this world, or the world that is underneath this world, or the world that is hidden and out of sight from this world that we perceive. I think that's the best way to put it, you know. Like, rather than talk about a world to come, I think the afterlife is the hidden life. So when somebody says to you, do you believe in the afterlife? It'd be more like to say, better to say, do you believe in the hidden life? And I do believe in the hidden life. I do believe that there is like a kind of a hidden internal forum of being that in some sense is related to or modulates this life. Now that's only a belief. That may be, from my point of view, a simple superstitious belief. And it's very, very likely, you know, that in my little innocence, in my little unlettered and uneducated way of thinking about faith and religion, that I'm on the wrong track entirely, and that in 100 years' time science will have evolved in a way that will kind of sort of prove conclusively that there is nothing but the surface of things. And I know you don't believe that no more than I do. I know you know that is crazy. The surface of things as we see them is a surface. Underneath there is a hidden being. That's how you experience yourself, being present. And the more deeper you go inside, into the room in your heart, the more deeper you go into yourself, the more present you become in the world, and the more the world becomes present to you. So when you come to talk about life, it is the hidden life underneath that seems to me, not the afterlife, but the hidden life. And so when you come to think about death, what I discovered in Tibetan Buddhism, what people told me, was that Tibetans don't really believe in death. It's as if for Tibetans there is no death. They have this sense of a kind of a beginningless time of constantly returning in the cycle of life. That me here now is just one moment in an endless cycle. And that goes back to the Buddha. They deduced that from their study of the great philosophy of Tsongkhapa. And Tsongkhapa was the guy who was putting together all the sutras and all the tantras and putting it all in one single system. It covered everything. It's called the Lamrim system. And he was using as his sources people like Nagarjuna and Atisha, great, great scholarly people 1,000 years ago, who came from India and brought the teachings to Tibet, and who also have a link, if you go from them back to the time of the Buddha. And so you get to this time where a great flowering of intellectual energy emerged, centered around the Buddha, and the ideas and the philosophy that he left behind. Not a revealed religion, but a set of sort of propositions, axioms, with the invitation to people, check this out. See how it works for you. Here is a way to meditate. Here's a way to think about life. Here's a way to think about being in the present. Check it out. One of the big major points of his ideas was what they called the Four Noble Truths. That there is suffering, that all suffering is generated by us, like that all our suffering is generated, we are responsible, but that there's a way out of suffering, and that the way out of suffering is to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Three things. They're like three things. A lot of people traditionally in the folklore, you always find three. He knocked 3 times. So in Buddhism, you find a teacher who's linked to that tradition. If you wanted to study Tibetan Buddhism, you would find a teacher, maybe online, maybe just following somebody online, maybe finding a connection with, one of the Tibetan Buddhist centers that is available to you, maybe going on a weekend to study Tibetan Buddhism. There's different ways to do it, but you're studying a kind of a philosophical view. You're not going to join a religion. When you step in, cross the threshold of a Buddhist center, you're not joining a religion. You're actually expressing the curiosity that says, I'd like to know what is their sense of the meaning of life. And therein the Lamrim teachings will be presented to you. If it's a Gelugpa or a Gelug school, I don't know how you pronounce these things. You find a teacher. You recognize that you are responsible for your life, that happiness follows you like a shadow, and that sadness follows you like a shadow. Good deeds, bad deeds, they have consequences. Every deed has a consequence. And if every deed has a consequence, and if human life is very short, very brief, if death is so certain, so absolutely certain, and yet we don't know when, we don't know exactly the circumstances of it, but if it's certain, it's going to come, and if our actions have consequences, then surely it means we should grasp the essence of life. Grasp the essence of life now. Don't leave it until tomorrow. Do it now. And that's really the core teaching of Tibetan Buddhism. In fact, that's the core teaching, I think, of all Buddhism. It then manifests in different ways, in different schools, from Zen to Tibetan Buddhism. There's just any amount of it. And it's all very rich. And none of it is a revealed religion. And if you're with somebody, if you're with a teacher, and it begins to sound like a revealed religion, or that it's based on, something like him being the center or her being the center, your teacher telling you, oh, this is really the truth, don't mind what's in the scriptures, then you're probably in the wrong place. Because a great way to test the teacher is to make sure that what's being taught is in harmony with the sutras, with the general teachings of Buddhism. And if you ever do this on a weekend, and I would imagine that a weekend course or a week course is about the best way to start. But if you ever do something like this, I can honestly say to you that in my life, when I was 40 years of age and I went to Jampa Ling in West Cavan and I stepped over the threshold, it was one of the most wonderful and best things I ever did in my life. It saved me when I needed saving. And more importantly, I think, it prepared me for the journey of returning to the Christian tradition and finding a new way to experience all the Christian sense of prayer in a new way. Because what Tibetan Buddhism was giving me was a structure of meditation, a structure of ways to understand the world and to be compassionate. And it wasn't in conflict with anything Christian. It's different. There's no doubt it's fundamentally different. And it's fundamentally different in the sense that it's not a revealed religion. There isn't a presumption that, God as a separate entity is trying to communicate to us in various ways through Jesus or some other prophet. No. They're not going to suggest that there is a God, but they're not saying there's not a God. The structure that I think Tibetan Buddhism can offer me is a way of seeing existentially how I live and how I suffer, and how that suffering is to do with karmic patterns of kind of, psychic evolution. I think that's a kind of a better way of thinking about it, that just as all species evolve physically, chemically, so too perhaps we evolve in our minds. So if I continually do negative things, let's say I'm hitting the cat with a broomstick, and I'm continually doing this, I am changing myself every time I do it. Every time I inflict pain on that little creature, I have become different. I am born again in that new experience. Yeah, I incarnate hatred and then therefore become hatred. And if I did it often enough, my face would begin to look very ugly. And eventually somebody, a stranger, a cat lover would be in the house, and the cat might irritate me. I would just get up and get the broom and give it a swipe. And they would look at me and say, what a horrible person he is. I wouldn't see the problem. What's the problem? I'm only hitting the cat. That is how karma works, that every action has consequence. Oh, it damages the cat, it hurts the cat, it destroys love, it destroys all the goodness that you might have built up, but it also has a karmic effect on your own psyche, on your soul, on your mentality. Now, when I say that Tibetans don't believe in death, it's not that they don't believe in death, it's that they understand death profoundly differently from we do. And really, if I was to put it in my words, I would say there's a sense in Tibetan Buddhism that the karma, the actions that you have become habitual, let's say negative actions that have become habitual and have consequences, will have consequences in your death. So that when the body dies in Western culture and the screen with the heartbeat flatlines and it's only a line and there's no pulse left, and the screen for the brain activity goes flat, when that happens, we say, that's the end of it. There's nobody there anymore. They vanished. They disappeared. This consciousness that is the most complex fruit of evolution just vanished. Sometimes people will say it goes nowhere. They'll say like, well, I think there is nothing after death. And they say it like there is nothing after death, as if nothing was a little room down a corridor with NOTHING written on it. But the great Professor Robert Thurman is marvellous at pointing out that nothing is nothing. You can't say there is nothing after death, because nothing is nothing. So you're not saying that there's something after death which is called nothing. And that's where Mr. Thurman, Professor Thurman, would suggest that's where Western culture deludes itself in a secular environment by saying, oh yeah, flatline, brain death, it's gone, there's nobody there, nothing there. As if there being nothing was some kind of big sleep that we fell into, called nothing. And the Tibetan view of death would be that all your karma, in the complex construction of your consciousness, your mind stream, all that is there has a bit of a problem when the heartbeat stops and the blood stops flowing and the sensations are still alive, like the sensations maybe of weight, of cement, like of a really heaviness in the body. And then maybe that turns to a kind of a fluid, a sense of water, a sense of just flowing totality of kind of flowing energy. And maybe that eventually dries out and there's a sensation of burning and dryness like a desert. And maybe that too goes as the body further and further begins to decompose. And eventually there's just a kind of a sense of wind or terrible stormy kind of energy. And there's the consciousness. There is the mind. Having those moments which are reported sometimes when people come back from the dead and you know, they said they had these out-of-body experiences where they were looking down on the body and they were wondering where they were and they could hear people talking, and so much of that now being researched. And what does this conscious being do? Well, the good news is that within the analysis that you might get in Tibetan Buddhism, and this is only according to my dim brain, the way I understand it, but the good news would be that at some stage you might find that you had practiced ahimsa so often during life, so powerfully, so strong, and that you had practiced meditation so strong and powerfully during life, that they kicked in, you know, their energy, their functionality kicked in. By ahimsa, I just mean non-violence. I just mean that sense that every time you automatically see somebody and you feel negative and you want to say something negative and you want to do something negative, generating negative emotion, disturbing emotion. As the Buddha would say, putting coal on the fire. That the conscious mind filled with all disturbing emotions is like a fire. So awakening is like putting out the fire, or allowing the fire to go out, and at least not putting any further coal on the fire. Don't feed the fire when you're in a situation where the whole samsara is entangling you, the whole, you know, surface level of reality is entangling you in negativity. Don't put coal on the fire. Be non-violent. Withdraw. Become aware. Know that you have disturbing emotions. Let them flow around you, in you, through you like a river. But don't grab them. Don't generate anything from them. And this practice is the practice of compassion, because this is the practice of being non-reactive to people you dislike. So you become aware of their presence. You become aware that they're like you. You're like them. We're all like each other. We're just human. There's no need to be negative. There's the mother of compassion. There's the beginning of compassion for the other person. And then when you're in the meditation session, because that kind of compassion is what you're doing during the day. But when you're meditating, then you're practicing single-pointed meditation. You're practicing being focused and being aware. You're practicing living on the inside. You know, that you're experiencing life at a surface underneath which there is a hidden life, the hidden life of consciousness. So let's suppose you've practiced those two things very well during life. They come to the fore during this bardo, they call it in Tibetan, this in-between time. After the moment of death, when the body is, you know, the blood circulation is beginning to cease, the brain is beginning to cease working. And consciousness is there. I mean, remember, consciousness is there even in a dream. So let's know that the body is now not functioning. Going to sleep would be a good metaphor, but it's not. It's dying, it's withering. And yet consciousness, like in a dream, will find itself like in a dream. And if you've been practicing this sense of like compassion and the sense of being focused, you're going to have a good journey. But if you're not, if you haven't been really practicing that kind of stuff, and if, on the other hand, you've been really generating negative karma, well, that's what will click in, that's what will take over, that's what will determine how your consciousness was going to jump or leap or find a new incarnation. You know the way this happens to me. I'll give you an example. Like, I'm driving in the car and something happens on the street that's so quick, so sudden, that it kind of frightens me, and something overrides my normal functions in anger. And I see somebody suddenly, you know, reversing out of a parking space, and they're about to reverse out on the road in front of me, and I go, fuck you. And it's like there's somebody sitting beside me in the car, and they're horrified. Oh, excuse me. Because they've seen me, my hidden anger, you know, the kind of raw, visceral emotion that can be there under the surface, and you can hide it under the surface, but scratch a little bit and you'll see what's negative in me or you or anybody else. And if somebody was feeding those emotions, then those emotions could flower in this time of transition, this bardo, to find another incarnation. And on we go, round and round in a circle of recycling in life, until eventually all our karma is purified, until eventually our mind completely awakens. Being completely here now, completely compassionate, and understanding that as death comes, it's not the end, but the beginning, the beautiful beginning, the beginning of a deep awakened presence. I think of the caterpillar that becomes the butterfly, and the butterfly contains nothing of the caterpillar. Nothing. Different animal, and yet it comes from the caterpillar. It grows out of the caterpillar. I live with the word transformation. I believe in the word transformation. And I cannot think of death without thinking of transformation. And the possibilities that are hinted at by nature of what mysterious and wonderful things lie deep and hidden below the surface of life, and the possibility that those beautiful things, driven by love and compassion, will surface if we were to discard this mortal coil, this mortal body. that almost death might be like loosening the knot, that the whole ego, the whole egoic self might be just a knot, the soul's knot, and that in some sense death, rather than being something terrible, could be a very beautiful letting go, loosening that knot, opening out the soul like a flower to be present eternally. And there's ways that in Tibetan Buddhist terms they would talk about bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas are people who, they say, in those moments of flowering, where the soul is loosened, the knot of human consciousness is loosened and the soul awakens. The compassion is so strong. Compassion has been practiced so well and so strong in the lifetime that the soul can only choose and desire to return again, not because of its own negative karma, but because of the just deep compassion for other beings. And so when people are reborn in Tibetan Buddhist philosophy, when somebody is reincarnated, a reincarnation is a bodhisattva, somebody who has returned because they want to return. This is true, they would say, of the great teachers and lamas and holy people, compassionate people. I find that idea very beautiful. I find that sometimes when I think of, there are certain people that I've met in life that transformed my life. Some of them that I'm still in love with and with. Others who were casual meetings, people that maybe met me for 2 or 3 weeks or 2 or 3 hours, and they influenced my life and changed me. I would say it's like imagining that you had met an angel, that they were a guide for me in life. And of course another way to think about it is the bodhisattva. That sometimes when you're with somebody who's really, really strongly beautiful in the way of sanctity, that they have a wholeness about them and a compassion to them that just glows like a light under their skin, like a lantern. When you meet somebody like that, it's as if you're meeting a bodhisattva, somebody who would return endlessly, rather than feed and become their own enlightenment, rather than sort of say, oh, I have been so good, now I'm enlightened. In that moment of compassion, in that bardo of transition after the death, the time of decay in the body, they just want to come back again, to gather more. Like a mother hen would gather her chicks, they want to come back for more, to love more. And there are people like that, I believe. And it's not a question of literal truth, it's a question of trying to find a poetic language that sufficiently contains the infinite compassion that some people have. Some people have so much kindness and goodness in them that I have to reach for language like Buddhist language to actually make sense of it. And so the sense of reincarnation, that doing good actions and having good energy in this lifetime, which is really grasping the source of life, to be compassionate and to be focused in your meditation. That's the essence of life in Buddhist terms, right? So to do that, it seems to me, there's 3 doors. Again, 3 things. They talk about speech, body and mind. So imagine in your speech there is no word ever of negative energy. Imagine in your actions there is no action ever of a negative type. Imagine in your mind there is no thought that is negative or disturbing. That would they would say that's like your 3 doors are being guarded. Because the door, the body is a door, the mind is a door, and the speech is a door. And these are the 3 doors that can allow in disturbing emotions. But imagine if you didn't do anything disturbing or negative, then your disposition would be so compassionate. And imagine if somebody said, there is a way to do this, there is a way to practice this. It's quite simple. And if you think about how your actions have consequences and think about the certainty of death, wouldn't it be a good thing to try it now? So that when you come to death, you will realize that you're coming to a place where there's a final reckoning about your actions. Not in a negative way. Because yes, we're all really going to come back. And we're going to come back to do better. And the bodhisattvas among us will come back as well to love us. But the ultimate goal would be to suppose that in some sense, in that process of letting go of the body, letting go of the ego, the personality, the identity, the construct that we have been building and working on, and through socialization, through all our lifetime, imagine unknotting that, loosening that, and we flower. Our soul flowers in a sense of just the ecstasy of being present in the cosmos, as being one with the cosmos. It seems to me very, very beautiful. And it seems to me very consoling. And it seems to me sometimes that in the secular world, there's a terrible loss of that consolation, even if the consolation itself is a metaphor. Now, who is to say that behind the metaphor there is not a substantial ontological reality that sustains the metaphor? Yes, that's a hugely important philosophical point. But I usually say, think about it as a metaphor. Think about it as poetic language. It is a poetic language that does 2 things. Firstly, it helps you be more present in the present moment. And secondly, it's deeply consoling. It is a really consoling thing for me to think that the utter beauty and sacredness of another human being evolving through compassion over 70 years does not go into nothing just when the heart screen flatlines, just when the brain energy goes flat. But that in some sense it goes into the hidden space that is around us all the time. Heaven being here and now in the experience of love. So death, I think that, I suppose when I say these things, they make me laugh, they make me smile. That's what I think. I call this the Laughing Buddha. There's something inside me laughing for joy. Something inside me is very happy. Something inside me is very grateful. And if I can work with that, if there were techniques that trained me how to get closer and closer to that joy, and that is really by following the Lam Rim, following the teachings of the Buddha, then wouldn't I surely grasp those teachings? Wouldn't I certainly study those ideas? So there's one final point I would make. And that is that everything I've said about the beautiful, beautiful teachings of the Buddha, as I received them from a teacher, they're called the Lamrim teachings in the Tibetan Gelug school. Those beautiful teachings that I have a very dim view of. This is a student speaking to you. This is somebody who doesn't really know properly how to explain things. But my experience is like a little glimpse, little sense that at the heart of it all, there is joy. There is joy and freedom at the heart of this thing we call human experience. And death is not an end but a transformation. Like from caterpillar to butterfly, the hint that we get in the cosmos is there is some profound transformation that we do not understand, but we know enough to know our conscious mind, our speech and our body can do negative things and can do compassionate and positive things. And our actions have consequences. And the darkness will follow us like a shadow, or the happiness will follow us like a shadow. Isn't that a beautiful, consoling thing? That happiness will follow you like a shadow if you do good actions. Do good actions. It will make you happy. More than anything else. And that's why, as I was saying, in secular, modern society, I feel that people miss that consolation. And it feeds their anxiety and dystopian sense of the future that everything is really going to be very bad everywhere in the world because they're missing the possibility of listening for the hidden world. It's in your heart, it's in my heart. And these beautiful teachings, these beautiful Buddhist teachings, I have found I found them not to be different from Christian teachings, but actually to enhance them. So that if I take all this Buddhist stuff, this is the way I see the world in Buddhist terms. Now let's step into the Christian story. Let's contextualize Jesus as the mentor deity, as the Buddha. Let's contextualize this beautiful day, the Day of All Saints, as the time of the Bodhisattvas, that in heaven and on earth the cosmos is full with an infinite number of great Bodhisattvas, awakened minds that love us compassionately, like the communion of saints. And tomorrow, one of my even more favourite days, All Souls Day. Not for the great Bodhisattvas, but a feast of every ordinary human, and I would dare to say animal, but every human especially, because it's only human realm in which awareness of suffering can lead to the motivation to be free from suffering. That's unique to humans, and if that be the case, then this is the life that's precious. Out of 1 million lives, the life you're living now is the only one that matters. Grasp the essence of life. And so no matter how the journey continues, we celebrate all souls tomorrow. All souls in all their journeys in the cosmos, in the bardo. All souls. So thank you. I'm laughing inside. I have a little laughing Buddha in my heart. Source of all comedy for me. And I'm doing so because I feel so grateful for having received Christian teachings and Buddhist teachings, and for the way that the journey of life unfolded, and that the way that, in some sense, the beautiful jewel, the jewel tree of Tibet. The jewel tree of Tibet is the big tree full of these jewels, these bodhisattvas and ideas and wisdoms and philosophies. This jewel tree of Tibet has been for me a guide, drawing me to it and then finding at its very centre the Christian icons and the presence of a God in Christian terms. And there you are. The Laughing Buddha, our little series is over. I'm not a scholar, I'm not a teacher, I'm sharing my story. And in the podcasts that I'm doing, part of sharing that story would have to be sharing these particular teachings of the Buddha with you. So I hope you've enjoyed them. And thank you for being here. Bye-bye.